Hey Dylan, tip number 3, please.
So in your conversation with Adam Boxer, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, he talked a lot about mini whiteboards, and so he actually exemplified one aspect of the fundamental principle of classroom formative assessment. Better evidence leads to better decisions, leads to better learning. Now, of course, as David Dider has pointed out, we can't be sure that what they've been doing in the lesson results in long-term learning. But you can be sure that if they have got the wrong end of the stick in the lesson, you find out about it before the lesson ends. And Adam talked very eloquently about mini whiteboards as a way of finding out what is going on, and he was rightly critical of cold call. Cold call is better than asking the usual suspects. If the smartest kid in the room gives you the correct answer, it doesn't mean that anybody else has got it. And the staggering thing for me is how prevalent that practice is of relying on evidence from the smartest kid in the room to make a decision about the learning needs of the other 39 kids in the class, in the case of Adam's class. And so, cold call is better because you're hearing from somebody who isn't necessarily the smartest kid in the room, but it's still weak because you're only hearing from one student. So mini whiteboards, I actually prefer multiple choice questions. And we've talked about this before, because it makes the job simpler. Reading 40 mini whiteboards is very difficult. Scanning 40 A, B, C, D cards, or even students, 1 for A, 2 for B, 3 for C, 4 for D, 5 for E. That makes it much simpler. So multiple choice questions have the benefit of pre-processing that data analysis task for the teacher. So Adam talked eloquently about the breadth of the evidence. I think to go with that, we have to talk about the depth of the evidence. Mm-hmm. So is this a question that is worth asking? And what we've discovered in our work with teachers is that good questions are really hard to come up with.
Yeah.
So the big idea here is you should plan the question as part of your lesson plan. If I was a head teacher and we had a policy of looking at teachers' lesson plans, which I'm not sure is a very sensible idea, but I'd be very happy with the teacher saying, here's the objectives of this lesson, and here's the questions I'm going to use to find out. There's no point in making teachers lay out the script they're going to use, because they're going to do what they've been doing for 20 years. But I think that the question that they ask to find out if the students have been successful is crucial. And many teachers ask questions where the students can get the right answer with the wrong thinking. So the big idea here is make the questions that you're going to be asking to check on an understanding part of the lesson planning process. The idea is you build that into the lesson. You always build plan B into plan A. I'm going to get to this point in the lesson, and I'm going to check to see whether the students are with me, and here is the question I'm going to ask at that point. And I script it word for word. One of the teachers in the CMOFAP project from Medway, Dave Tuffin, he often, if he had a sixth form class in the morning, he would post up a question that he'd planned to use with his year 8 class in the afternoon, say, and the class would often discuss whether that was a good question to be using. So making these questions kind of things that you discuss, and maybe changing a word here or there can make it work slightly more effectively. That idea of refining and polishing your questions and including them as part of a lesson plan. That's my third tip. Make question planning part of lesson planning.
I like it. Just two things on that. One, I think we both agree. It's hard, isn't it? As you've said there, it's writing these questions is tough. And for many years as a teacher, that was the last thing I thought of in my plan. My plan was all about the activity, all about the bright, shiny paper wrapped around it and so on. One, I very rarely check for understanding, so let's just put that on the table. But then when I did learn that checking for understanding was a good thing, I almost thought, well, I'll just make the question up on the spot. It'll be fine. And again, having written however many thousand diagnostic questions, you realise how hard it is to write a good question, and how planning those in advance and working with perhaps more experienced colleagues and making it a collaborative process is a really important part of this. So that's the first thing I wanted to reflect on. Secondly, I was doing some work just yesterday, actually, in a school, and they were looking to improve their scheme of work. And the classic thing they had on their scheme of work, and you see this on every scheme of work, is it said, like, in these 2 weeks we're teaching percentages, and these are the objectives. So kids have got to be able to find a percentage of an amount without a calculator, percentage of an amount with a calculator, reverse percentages, blah, blah, blah. And the point I was making with the head of department is it'd be so much more powerful if you had examples of the type of questions you wanted kids to be able to answer. And they could be used as those hinge point questions so that every teacher at some point will ask that question. And it may be at different points if kids are working faster and so on. But there's your well thought through hinge point question. And if the kids do well at it, okay, we crack on. If they don't, you've got this plan B as you speak about. But I very rarely see, I don't know if you do, in schemes of work, in schemes of learning, kind of examples of questions. And for me, it feels like one of the most important things to put in there.
Absolutely. What would it mean to be successful?
Yeah.
And the thing is, this is a bit of a jargon phrase, but one of my favourite phrases is assessments operationalise constructs.
Oh, wow.
So we can talk about what it means to be able to add fractions. But the question is, which fractions do you mean?
Yeah.
And so the assessments put flesh on the bones of those ideas. We might think we agree about what it means to be able to rank fractions in order of magnitude. But until we talk about the questions we're going to use to determine that, we don't know that. And in fact, often we find out that we have very different ideas of what it would mean to do that in practice. So assessments force you to get off the fence and say exactly, if my teaching has been successful, then my student will be able to answer this question correctly.
Yes.
And that's why assessments are so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely the last thing on this is it helps the kids as well, right? Because you have these lesson objectives, and teachers can't interpret them. The kids certainly don't have a clue what's going on with them. Whereas there's something real concrete about a question. Can you answer this question or not? And that's the kind of good hinge point. No, I love that, Dylan. That's great.